Welcome back to another training with Blue Equinox. This is Baron Solomon, and this is going to be the second part of the prospecting trainings. This is going to cover the time right after you have made the first 20 seconds. You've got the potential prospect or the potential customer listening. So now what? What's the next step from here? One good thing that you can do is go ahead and identify some potential business needs before you call your customer. So, business needs can be controllable and uncontrollable. They are things that you are going to use to try and touch on a few of potential hot points for the customer. What you're going to do is you're going to ask some really targeted questions about the economy or their specific IT goals to ascertain if there is a potential prospecting opportunity here. What you want to do is obviously make sure that you are with the qualified decision maker when you're asking these questions. But that's what you need to do next when you're on the phone, is to identify some potential business issues and needs and maybe start to touch on some of those. So obviously what you want to do is you want to research the company before you call them. You want to research the potential partner or the potential customer ahead of time to understand for their particular vertical what you are looking at for potential hot button issues. Like it says down there at the bottom, this should not be something where you are diving into specifically their business. It's going to be more of an overview of their industry in general. So for example, with hotels, a lot of times the brand will raise the minimum bandwidth requirement per hotel. So you can ask them, listen, Marriott recently raised their brand standards to 50 megs. Do you guys have somebody who's taking care of that for you? Have you already moved to, moved up to the new bandwidth requirements? That's something that's industry specific, vertical specific. You are asking them if they have somebody who's handling that for them, but you have not directly been involved in the particulars of what they have currently on site. So as we dive into this, controllable and uncontrollable are going to be some of the things that you're going to want to identify. Can you ask them about controllable things like, hey, do you have someone handling that for you as far as upgrading your bandwidth at the hotel? And then also you can ask them, some uncontrollable things like, hey, you're actually combining uncontrollable and controllable, and asking them about the brand standards at hotels, because they can't control whether the brand is going to force them to upgrade their bandwidth, but they can control whether they have somebody handling that for them. So you're going to be looking for things like the economy, like a brand requirement, like an industry requirement, like a regulatory committee making a change. You're going to be looking for things like that to help you make better decisions as to what to ask them questions about from an uncontrollable side. Now, as far as controllable issues, those are obviously going to be more specific to the business, to the industry. Those are pretty easy to come up with. It's more difficult to come up with uncontrollable issues, but a good combination of both is really what you can use to make sure that your points are hitting home. So, like I already covered a little bit of, you've got controllable issues such as, have you taken care of your disaster recovery? Do you have somebody who's handling desktop support for you? What are your plans for expansion in the coming year? And then obviously, like I said, regulatory committees, government agencies, those are going to be your uncontrollable issues. So, obviously with each individual prospect, you're going to have a completely different set of questions. And it's important to do your research ahead of time to understand which ones might apply. We're going to walk through a couple of specific examples about some things that you can, ask, you can use to try and get an in with a potential customer. This one says, according to Gartner, today more than 95% of businesses unknowingly host compromised endpoints. Have you ever experienced a security breach of critical patient records because of a lack of security at one of your endpoints? Well, let them answer and see what the issue is. If they say, yeah, we actually have, then there's your in right there. Well, let's go ahead and talk about endpoint management. If they say no, you can still parlay that into, well, do you want to make sure that the endpoints that you have, such as computers, tablets, cell phones that are accessing your network? Do you have somebody that's making sure that those are secure so you don't have a breach like that? These are things that you want to use. That is using a statistic and a very industry-specific question. Obviously, so for patient records, you're going to be looking at a doctor's office or a dentist office of somebody who's handling critically important records and documents about patients that should not ever be compromised. It's actually illegal for them to be compromised. They can face heavy fines and potential damages for that. So, things like this with your opening statement or, an interesting statistic or topic, those are things you can use to get your foot in the door. So, obviously there are many questions and examples that you can use to get an in. In the next 2-3 slides, we're going to cover a myriad of those possibilities. You can go ahead and read through some of these to help you get an understanding of, maybe some questions that you can ask. Obviously, you can read all of these for yourself. You can pause the video if you need to make sure that you are getting all that you need to be able to ask the appropriate questions. I'm not going to spend too much time reading through the specific examples, but feel free to pause, stop, go back, write them down, do whatever you need to do. Use this slide or these 2 slides as you're prospecting. But these are just some really good examples of questions that you can use to potentially get an in with a prospect. So, what's the goal of asking questions? What's the goal of, all of this? Well, the goal is for you to set an appointment to get the meeting. So, obviously, you want to make sure that you're qualifying people who actually could use your services and need your help. So that's what these questions are for. You also want to make sure that you're speaking to the appropriate decision maker. You don't want to have a meeting with somebody who can't actually make the decision about what you're trying to talk to them about or what you're trying to sell them, because that's just going to be a waste of your time, and it's going to be very frustrating not to deal directly with the decision maker. But that is the goal. Your goal is to close for the appointment. You want to close for the opportunity to sit in front of them and dive more deeply into what they've got going on as a company. So, closing statements are extremely important. We talked about in some of the rebuttal techniques, making the move to say, so with all that being said, what about next Tuesday? So with all that being said, would you have time for an appointment next week? Your goal is to set the appointment. That's why you ask the questions. That's why you try to get it in. So remember that. Keep that in the back of your mind and make sure that you're setting the appointment with the appropriate people. So here's an example of, a couple of closing statements or, a few things that you can say to potentially go ahead and set that meeting based on our conversation. I believe your company can potentially benefit, and we can help you. I'd like to set an appointment to learn more about your business, see if there's mutual interest in moving forward. You guys can use this exactly, or you can write it down in your own words, but make sure you have something that you feel is comfortable for you, but also confident in saying, listen, based on what I'm hearing, you guys seem like a perfect prospect for our services. Would you like to set a meeting for next week? It can be as simple as that. Obviously, the longer, the more interesting you're going to need to be. So make sure that you are not going to lose their attention. But you always want to close. You always want to be setting that calendar invitation. You always want to be the one in control of the conversation and to keep the ball moving. So congratulations, you have made it through the first 20 seconds, and now you have their attention and you have set a meeting. We're going to continue to move forward with these trainings. This is Baron Solomon, and we will see you next time.